Across the vast expanse of Texas lie places that weren't meant to be found. Stone wells that whisper in dead languages, voices rising from the dark when no one speaks above them. Black shafts that never run dry, where time slips and reflections don't belong to you. Stone doors sealed in canyon walls, lights moving under still water, and mounds where tools fail, animals freeze, and something unseen hums just beneath your feet. Today, we're exploring 30 of Texas's most mysterious sites, places where a creature half man, half goat is said to stalk an old iron bridge at night, its red eyes glowing through the dark like coals beneath the surface of a fire. Where something massive moves beneath a lake's surface, seen only as rising columns of bubbles and shapes that never break the waterline. Where strange symbols are carved into cliff faces, and ancient stone doors appear after floods, then vanish without a trace. Structures hidden beneath reservoirs, skeletons taller than any human, sites where electronics fail, compasses spin, and silence falls too suddenly to feel natural. Each one has sparked reports, denials, and questions that officials refuse to answer. As always with our videos, the visuals are here for atmosphere, but not required. So whether you're watching or just listening, get comfortable, settle in, and let's trace the forgotten edges of a state that remembers more than it reveals. This is mysterious Texas, in the Rocky Hills of Central Texas, just west of San Marcos. A stretch of land winds between cedar trees and exposed limestone ridges. Locals call it the Devil's Backbone, a scenic drive by day but something else entirely when the sun goes down. The landscape is stark and open, but drivers report seeing figures dart between trees, vanishing before headlights can catch them. Ranchers nearby hear voices at night, not loud, but close as if someone is speaking just behind them, always just out of reach. Some have reported footsteps on gravel paths when no one is there, and the clink of old spurs echoing through dry air. The area has been the site of accidents, disappearances, and stories that don't end cleanly. In 1976, a man camping alone claimed he saw a group of figures by his firelight dressed in Confederate uniforms, watching silently. He packed up before dawn. Decades earlier, a survey team refused to return after hearing what they described as laughter underground. One local legend says a Spanish soldier once buried something here gold, or something stranger and that he still walks the ridge, searching. Hikers sometimes stumble upon small stone arrangements, circles that weren't there the day before. Animals refuse to cross certain points on the trail. One spot in particular, just past a twisted oak with lightning scars, causes compasses to spin. A state trooper once reported seeing headlights from the opposite direction, but the road was empty. When he pulled over, his patrol car lost power completely for 10 minutes. He never filed a full report. Locals leave offerings at the ridge's highest point. Coins, boots, crosses carved into bark. Some believe the backbone is a fold in the land where time and memory overlap, where past violence still walks. Others say it's a place where the rules simply shift, and for those who don't listen, the land answers back. Not loudly, not all at once, but in footsteps, in voices, in silence that waits too long before breaking. Others tell of a woman in white seen walking barefoot along the edge of the cliff. Her gown never touches the rocks. Those who pull over and approach her say she turns, but her face is blurred, like heat rising from asphalt. She never speaks. Sometimes she disappears in plain sight. And on certain nights, the wind shifts, carrying the scent of sulfur, a burnt smell, sharp and wrong, that lingers long after you've left. One old ranch hand who's lived near the backbone for 70 years puts it simply, "It ain't the devil's road, son. It's where he watches from." In the low-lying woods of Denton County, where Hickory Creek cuts quietly through the trees, an old iron bridge stands forgotten by most maps, but not by memory. Locals know it as Goatman's Bridge, though its official name, Old Alton Bridger, rarely passes anyone's lips after dark. The structure itself is simple: rusted iron beams, wooden planks, and bolts that creak even when no one is walking. But the stories around it are not simple. They are layered, repeated, changed slightly with each telling, but always circling back to something half seen and half believed. Stories gather like fog here. Tales of a creature half man, half goat, an apparition with glowing eyes and horns that appear and vanish at will. Travelers recount the sounds of hooves striking metal, the scrape of claws on concrete, and eyes watching just beyond the headlights. Some say the legend began in the 1930s, when a local man feared he had been cursed after a botched experiment to crossbreed human and goat DNA, an unholy mixture born from desperation and dark science. Others believe it's an ancient guardian, a protector of the woods, punishing those who dare disrespect the land. The bridge itself is a threshold, a place where the veil between worlds thins and the legend walks freely at night. Hikers report a chill that bites through clothing, whispers that circle the ears, and sometimes a shadow crossing behind the trees that disappears before it can be seen fully. Teenagers used to come here on Darasum, still Dobit, fewer return, with nothing to say. One group left their car running while they stepped onto the bridge. They returned 10 minutes later to find every window fogged from the inside, and a handprint too large to match anyone in the group. In 2012, a deputy responding to reports of screaming in the area claimed to have seen a figure crouched at the end of the bridge. When he approached, it dropped to all fours and vanished under the structure without making a sound. He didn't file a full report either. Some believe the bridge channels something older than the legend itself. There are rumors that a cult once used the site for rituals, marked by carvings in the trees nearby, symbols that don't match any known language. Wildlife avoids the area. Dogs refuse to cross. On nights with no moon, the bridge seems longer, as if space itself stretches, and sometimes people walking halfway across turn back not from fear, but because something tells them not to finish. A sound or a thought that isn't theirs. The Goatman doesn't always appear, but when he does, it's not to chase, it's to observe, to wait, and sometimes to follow. In the pinewood lowlands near Nacogdoches, where the soil is thick with iron and the roots run deep, old stories surface whenever the earth is disturbed. Not all of them are stories. In the 1930s, a farmer digging a well near the Angelina River unearthed what he thought were animal bones. But the femur he pulled out was the length of his entire arm. A local doctor examined it and could not explain it. The bones were buried again quietly. They were never officially recorded. Over the decades, others found similar remains. In 1957, a construction crew widening a road outside Chirino struck what they first assumed was a tree root. It was a rib cage at twice the width of a man's shoulders. Nearby, embedded in red clay, was what appeared to be a copper amulet, green with corrosion, but still etched with symbols. No one could identify the markings. The object disappeared before it reached any lab. People speak in half-truths and murmurs. Of skeletons over 8 feet tall. Of burial pits lined with stones not native to the region. Of jawbones large enough to fit over a grown man's face. The official stance is silence. There are no museums, no plaques, no references in the county archive. But retired workers tell a different version, one they're careful not to repeat in public. In the 1970s, a pipeline survey near the same river turned up what was described as a mass grave. The bones were massive, the arrangement deliberate. Someone made the call, and within a day, the site was sealed. Equipment was removed. The land was marked as unstable, and the project was redirected. One former foreman kept a fragment of copper he swore was from that dig. It was cold even in the Texas sun, and when rubbed, it gave off a faint metallic tone, almost like a bell. He never showed it twice to the same person, and then he stopped showing it at all. The native Caddo people speak of a time before the tribes, when beings of great size walked the river trails and left carvings in stone, now lost to erosion. The stories say they weren't just large, they were different, quiet, structured, intentional. What was buried near Nacogdoches didn't collapse in death. It was arranged, placed with care, marked with copper, and always the digs stop before they finish. Not because of permits, not because of weather, but because something under the earth resists being exposed. Outside the small town of Alton, in a quiet field near Highway 21, the ground swells into smooth, unnatural shapes. 3 mounds rise from the landscape, not high enough to seem imposing, but too deliberate to be called hills. This is the site of the Caddo mounds, built over 1,000 years ago by a civilization whose exact rituals have been lost to time. Official signs call it a ceremonial center. But among the people who still live nearby, descendants, caretakers, watchers, there are other names. One is the Serpent Path. On satellite imagery, faint outlines can be seen winding between the mounds in curved, flowing arcs. Some researchers argue it's coincidence. Others say the curves align with solstices and equinoxes too precisely to ignore. In 2011, a visiting archaeoastronomer brought handheld instruments and found magnetic anomalies in the same pattern swake, but consistent. He didn't publish his findings. His notes mentioned patterned resistance in the soil and unexplained discharges from otherwise inert stone markers. At ground level, the paths seem almost invisible, but walkers often find themselves turning without knowing why, following curves that aren't marked, bending in arcs that eventually bring them back to where they started, though the trees around them feel changed. At the eastern edge of the site lies a partially excavated platform. Some believe it once held a temple aligned with the rising sun on Midsummer's Day. But the deeper layers tell a stranger story. Beneath the ceremonial floor, archaeologists uncovered layers of burned soil alternating with untouched earth. Burn, rest, burn, rest. Someone had intentionally scorched the earth at regular intervals, then sealed it again with clean clay. No one can explain why. The Caddo people, whose descendants still visit the site, say the mounds were places of emergence, not graves, not homes, openings, windows between layers of the world. One elder recounted a family story of a woman who walked the path on the wrong day and returned with white in her hair and no memory of her name. The story was told without irony, without exaggeration, just fact. In 2019, after a tornado damaged part of the site, workers repairing the area discovered a row of stones buried edge up in the ground shape to resemble a spine, curving north to south. No one had seen them before. No one knows who placed them. But the curve matches the same arc seen from satellite views. When the wind moves through the tall grass at dusk, it moves in wave scoiling, rippling, never straight. And those who walk the path alone often report a sense of being watched not from above, but from beneath. In a dry arroyo northwest of Austin, a construction project in 1983 came to a sudden halt when a backhoe scraped against something that wasn't stone and didn't give like soil. Workers uncovered a skeleton curled on its side, arms folded, jaw tilted skyward. It was intact, unusually intact. Paleontologists arrived the next morning and dated the remains to over 10,000 years ago, older than the pyramids, older than written language, older than the idea of Texas itself. She was named the Leanderthal Lady. But what surprised even the scientists wasn't just her age, it was her preservation. The bones were almost undamaged. Soil conditions should have eaten away the structure. Instead, they were dry, sealed by a natural layer of calcium and sediment that seemed too perfect to be accidental. Around her body, no tools were found, no pottery, no ash, no trace of burial ritual as understood by current archaeological frameworks, just stone, smooth, flat, arranged in a shallow oval barely wider than her frame. And beneath that, a thin layer of dark organic material burned, but not from a fire. Chemical tests showed signs of a rapid temperature event, one inconsistent with open flames. Something intense, something contained. The findings were quietly minimized. Official publications omitted the burn layer, citing contamination, but off-record discussions among lab techs included theories no one dared print. Extreme localized energy, magnetic residue, trace elements not native to Central Texas. One assistant claimed her compass spun in the pit. Another refused to return after hearing a tone high, constant, inaudible to others, but deafening to her. The remains were relocated for preservation. The site was covered. But those who had worked the dig began noticing a pattern. Dreams, vivid and repeating, of caves, lit from within, of a woman standing in the dark with her hands raised, palms outward, eyes closed. Always the same image, always silent. The locals didn't need convincing. Some had long told stories of the hill country whispering at night, of lights flickering beneath the limestone, of animals that would not walk past certain spots. Old tribal tales from long before the Leanderthal Lady's time spoke of watcher-snot spirits, not gods, but figures who remained underground, who marked the places where memory was stored, not written. What lay in that shallow grave may not have been buried in the way we understand burial. It may have been sealed, preserved for something or someone. And when the machines cut through the earth that day, maybe it wasn't discovery, maybe it was interruption. When Lake Travis was formed in the 1940s, it swallowed valleys, hills, and entire homesteads beneath its rising waters. The reservoir, built to tame the Colorado River, buried the past in layers of sediment and silence. What was lost below has never fully surfaced, except in fragments, and in stories told by divers who come up too fast, breathing harder than the depth requires. They say there are buildings beneath the surface that don't match any old maps, foundations without towns, stone blocks arranged too precisely to be remnants of collapsed barns or cabins. One diver, a former geologist, reported discovering what looked like an entryway carved into bedrock, a rectangular hole framed by stones that bore chisel marks. He swam inside 10 feet, found nothing but stillness, and backed out slowly. He never returned. Another spoke of a staircase that ended in silt, as if it once led somewhere before the rest was buried or never built. In 1998, a group of recreational divers found a set of columns standing upright on the lake floor, partially encased in algae and mud. They filmed the site, but the footage was later lost. Only still images remain fuzzy, green-tinted, inconclusive. But the spacing between the columns was uniform, measured, deliberate. Engineers claimed they were remnants of docks or flood markers. The divers disagreed. Some areas of the lake remain off-limits due to shifting currents and unstable walls, but local rumors say those restrictions exist for another reason. A member of a diving rescue team once confessed to seeing lights deep under the water, moving slowly, like lanterns. He followed them until the pressure in his ears became unbearable. He surfaced with a nosebleed and didn't dive again. Locals speak of places on the shoreline where the water feels colder unnaturally, soven in peak summer. Fish don't linger there, neither do birds. And sometimes, at night, people walking along the dam hear something tapping against the concrete. Not waves, not wind, rhythmic, soft, measured. There is no official record of structures beneath Lake Travis, aside from a few scattered homes and one small cemetery. But the sonar scans tell a more complicated story, rounded shapes in linear patterns, sharp angles where none should exist, depth charts with dead zones, areas where the readings simply vanish. Those who have mapped the floor admit off record that the terrain doesn't behave like a flooded landscape. It behaves like a buried one. Something built before the water came, something sealed under layers of silence and time. And every few years, when the lake drops far enough, someone finds something new. A corner, a carving, a wall. And then the water rises again, and the lake keeps its secrets. In the dry scrublands west of Austin, the ground shifts from grass to gravel, then to fields of stone that look like someone tried to melt the earth. Scattered across central Texas, these are known as burned rock, Midden's thousands of layers of fire-cracked limestone and flint, some mounds stretching over 100 feet wide and several feet deep. Archaeologists say they're the remnants of ancient cooking sites, where earth ovens were used for centuries to roast agave and other roots. But the size of them, the sheer scale, tells another story. Some Midden fields contain millions of stones, each one split from heat, arranged in mounds too massive for a single fire or a single generation. A few sites date back over 80 years. Others show evidence of being used, buried, then reopened centuries later, as if returning to something sacred or unfinished. In 2001, during a site survey in Blanco County, a team uncovered a set of blackened stones that formed a near-perfect circle. Inside it, the soil was unusually fine. Beneath that, a pattern of post holes arranged in a spiral. No hearth, no ash, just burned rock and absence. The lead archaeologist published a short abstract, then left the project. Locals had warned them not to dig there, not because of superstition, but because of memory. The elders remembered their fathers refusing to camp in those spots. Tools would go missing, fires wouldn't light, and the silence at night didn't feel natural. It felt enforced, not quiet but restrained. In another part of Llano County, a rancher clearing brush uncovered a layer of Midden rock 3 feet down. Embedded within it was something metallic, not rusted, not modern, bronze-colored, with a repeating pattern etched along the edge-sharp angles, like teeth. The artifact was handed to a local museum. It was cataloged, then disappeared. Requests for information were denied. When the land was resurveyed, years later, no trace of the metallic objector, the Midden layer, was found. It had been covered or removed. Some researchers argue that the burn patterns across the region suggest coordinated use of sites lit simultaneously, then left cold for years. A cycle, a system, not survival, but ceremony. Some Middens run in linear paths, almost like roadways of ash and cracked stone, vanishing into the hills. From above, satellite imagery shows faint geometric shape circles, lines, spokes, shapes too large to see from the ground, but unmistakable from the sky. If these were ovens, they were built for more than food. If they were fires, they marked more than heat. They marked place, memory, territory, or perhaps warning. East of El Paso, where the land flattens into desert and the sky opens without interruption, a cluster of weathered rock formations rises suddenly from the sand. Known as Hueco Tanks, these boulders and cliffs form natural cistern pockets of water in an otherwise dry world. But the water is not what draws people here. Not anymore. Hidden in caves, on overhangs, and in crevices only visible at certain angles, thousands of pictographs cover the stone. Red, black, yellow. Some are obvious animals, hunting scenes, people, but others resist explanation. Spirals inside boxes, grids that match no known language. Long figures with eyes too large, hands with 6 fingers, heads that radiate lines like sunbursts or signal diagrams. These glyphs were created by the Jornada Mogollon people over 1,000 years ago. But some have been dated older, much older. One particular figure, high up on a cliff face that requires gear to reach, has no known parallel in any southwestern rock art. It depicts a being with limbs extended, standing in the center of a pattern of concentric circles. Around the edge, dots, 13 of them. Some say they mirror the moon cycles. Others believe they represent visitor zones who come and go. In 1997, a park ranger exploring an unmapped cavern discovered a panel of glyphs that were unusually deep-etched, not painted. The figures showed motion, a group of beings moving through a doorway or arch, with curved lines suggesting descent. One figure had no eyes. The ranger filed a report. A week later, the cavern was sealed off due to instability. It was never reopened. Visitors today still find odd things. Strange echoes in narrow passageways. Electronic equipment that fails at specific locations. One researcher's drone lost connection the moment it hovered over a glyph with radiating lines. It crashed into the rock. When recovered, the video file was corrupted, but the audio remained. A tone, constant, too low to hear unless amplified. Native guides speak cautiously about the area. The stories passed down aren't warnings, they're instructions. Don't touch the red glyphs. Don't bring mirrors. Leave before dusk. Some stories speak of the Huecos as windows, not spiritual, but literal. Points where the land is thin, where something ancient still looks, outer waits to be seen. What makes Hueco Tanks different isn't just the number of pictographs. It's their precision, the repetition, the geometry. These weren't made by chance, and they weren't all meant to be seen from the ground. Some align with solstice light, others face magnetic north exactly, and some only appear under moonlight, revealing details invisible in the day. Whatever the Jornada Mogollon saw here, it left an impression that continues to resist silence. Somewhere beyond the tree line in Blanco County, where the hills roll low and unbroken, and the soil turns to rust-colored dust, there's a place locals call the Whisper Ring. It's not on maps. There's no sign, but hunters speak of it, hikers stumble on it, and once you've stood inside it, you never quite forget how it felt. The formation is simple. At first glance, 15 stones, roughly the same height, arranged in a nearly perfect circle. Not monolithic, not carved, but too evenly spaced to be accidental. Each stone bears weather marks, lichens, and deep vertical striations, as though something heavy pressed down over time. But it's the center of the ring where things shift. Stand there and speak in a normal voice, and your words bend distorted, hushed, delayed by a fraction of a second. Some describe it like speaking into a well. Others say the sound returns not as an echo, but as a whisper just behind their shoulder. Technicians with sound meters have tried measuring the anomaly. The results are inconsistent. Audio rebounds at odd frequencies. Wind dies inside the circle. Phones record static. One researcher claimed the whisper said something different than what was spoken. She never released the audio. The land is fenced now, privately owned. But the stories go back generations. And 1,889 Homesteader's Journal speaks of a stone ring where sound betrays the speaker. In 1923, a local newspaper mentioned a group of teenagers who camped at the site and returned. The next day, unable to speak above a whisper for a week. There was no follow-up. Native accounts are harder to verify, but some oral traditions reference a place where the air listens. One story tells of a woman who sang to the stones and was answered, not by a voice, but by a vision, stars falling in reverse, and a figure rising from the ground in silence. Skeptics dismiss it as natural acoustics amplified by the terrain, but no other formation in the area produces the same effect. No caves, no bowls, no canyons, just flat earth and stone. And those who've walked its perimeter report another detail. Compasses spin near the western edge. Metal tools left overnight show signs of magnetic warping. Watches lose time. And small animals refuse to cross the boundary. In the early 2000s, a documentary crew tried filming at the site. Half the audio was unusable. Dialogue recorded outdoors sounded like it had been spoken in a tunnel. The footage was never released. They said it wasn't interesting enough. But locals remember the crew leaving in a hurry, and one of them returning weeks later alone. No camera, no sound gear, just a notebook and a chair placed exactly in the center of the ring. In the harsh wilderness of southwest Texas, where the land folds into limestone cliffs and water carves silence into rock, there runs a river that seems older than the map around it. The Devil's River, clear and cold, even in summer, twists through canyons far from towns, far from roads. Its name came not from myth, but from reputation. People go missing here not in dozens, but in ones. Quiet disappearances. A fisherman who never returned. A kayaker whose boat was found upright, supplies untouched. And the river tells nothing. It carries no sound, no trace. Local guides warn visitors not to travel alone, especially near dusk. Not because of animals or terrain, but because of the watchers. They call them shadows, not figures. Not ghosts, just movements, seen from the corner of the eye. Shapes on ridgelines that vanish when approached. Sometimes a reflection on the water that doesn't belong to anyone standing nearby. Some have tried to document them. Cameras fail. Footage turns blank. One drone operator recorded 15 minutes of clean flight, only to find the file blacked out except for a single second one frame of a figure on the shore. Too tall, too still, no features. The ranger station keeps no record of this. But rangers talk. Around campfires. Off the clock. They tell of nights where the river goes. Silent, no frogs, no insects, not even the ripple of water. Just stillness, followed by the feeling of being watched. Like the river is holding its breath. And something with it. Rock shelters along the canyon walls hold ancient paintings hundreds, maybe thousands of years old. Some show animals. Others show figures in cloaks with circular heads and no faces. One cave in particular has a mural, unlike the rest. Concentric rings surrounding a single black shape, not man, not beast. Anthropologists claim they're ceremonial, but they don't say what kind of ceremony. In 2004, a university team set up a monitoring station near the North Bend. It operated for 4 days. Then the signal was lost. When they returned, the tent was flattened, the equipment missing, and the stone slab where it had been set up was scorched, not burned polished, as if something had dragged across it with heat. The team never published their findings. One researcher resigned. Another was hospitalized for stress-related symptoms. Locals weren't surprised. They say the land doesn't like being measured, that the river listens, that it remembers. And when strangers come with tools and plans, the shadows start to move again. Watching, not chasing, not harming, just letting you know they're there, that you are no longer alone, even if you came here to be. Near the border town of Presidio, where the Rio Grande carves out dry ravines and the sun leaves no shadow untouched, there are wells that locals don't use. They call them the Black Mouthswide, perfectly round holes cut deep into the desert rock. Some are capped with rusted iron grates. Others remain open, hidden behind brush and stone. No one knows who built them. They're older than the ranches, older than the Spanish maps, and older, some say, than the tribes who first wandered this desert. Official records mark them as cistern storage from an early settler period. But there are too many, and they're too deep. Divers lowered into one well in the 1970s never reached the bottom. Their light disappeared long before the rope did. They described the air below as unnaturally cold. The rock walls too smooth, the echo too slow to return. The equipment malfunctioned. The footage was lost. Locals tell stories, dogs that vanish near the wells, birds that avoid the area entirely. One rancher swore he saw a reflection in the water that wasn't his someone taller, standing behind him in the heat where no one was. Another man claimed to have lost 30 minutes near a capped well. His watch, his phone, and his vehicle clock all disagreed about the time he was gone. The wells are never dry. Even in drought, they hold still, black water that doesn't ripple unless touched, and when it is, the ripple doesn't spread, it sinks, as if the surface pulls sound and motion downward. In 1992, a geophysicist attempted a magnetic survey around one of the deeper wells. The compass readings reversed polarity for several feet near the edge. GPS drifted, and at the center, instruments recorded a constant hum at 18.98 Hz. a frequency associated with vibration just beneath human hearing, one known to cause anxiety, unease, even hallucinations. The site was abandoned, the paper never published. Border Patrol agents sometimes report movement on infrared, only to find nothing visible. One former agent said the shapes appear as silhouette a stall, symmetrical, standing still. He refused to return after one such night. The indigenous stories are harder to access. Most tribes in the area have no direct link to the wells, but a few legends describe openings that lead to stars beneath the ground. Not heavens, not hells, just a place between, a holding place. Theories abound. Lava tubes, natural sinkholes, early mining attempts. But none explain the perfection of the stone, the smoothness of the shafts, the behavior of water that doesn't reflect right. In 2009, a private group attempted to map one of the largest wells using sonar. The signal returned a strange result: a hollow space, round and open, 60 feet wide at the bottom. Not a shaft, a chamber. And then the sonar cut out. They left and did not return. One of them still lives in Alpine. He won't talk about what they found, but he hasn't slept well since. In a quiet stretch of Henderson County, bordered by pine groves and fields that used to be cotton, there sits a hill no higher than a 2-story house. Locals call it the Screaming Mound, not because of any sound they've recorded, but because of what people report hearing inside their own heads when they get too close. From a distance, it looks like any other rise in the landscape, but the grass grows shorter there, and the air tastes faintly metallic. Some say it hums, not out loud, but in your bones, like standing near an engine that never turns off. Children who played on it spoke of headaches, strange dreams, and sudden nosebleeds. One boy, in 1966, went missing for 6 hours. When he was found walking along the highway miles away, barefoot and silent, he refused to speak for a week. His first words back were, "It was underneath." No one asked what it was. The land has no structures, no tombstones. But a 19th century map shows the hill marked with a symbol, 3 concentric circles, and a single dot in the center. The same symbol appears in a farmer's journal from 1883, next to a note. The noise returned again last night. Same hour, same pressure behind the eyes. In 1985, a local historian attempted ground-penetrating radar on the mound. The readings showed dense layers beneath, too regular to be natural. Stone slabs, possibly, or a chamber. The machine shut down before a full scan could be completed. It never worked again. She submitted her findings to a regional university, but they declined further inquiry, said the site lacked significance. But strange incidents continued. A woman walking her dog near the site reported the animal collapsing without causing no injury, no illness. It survived, but never went near the hill again. A storm chaser noted that lightning often strikes within a half-mile radius of the mound more than any surrounding area. And once, during a summer drought, a fire broke out in the grass, surrounding the hill but not on it. The flames formed a perfect ring, sparing the center. No natural cause was determined. Some believe it's a burial mound, one older than any known civilization in the region. But carbon samples have never been officially taken. The property is now owned by a private developer. Plans were filed to flatten the hill for future construction. The paperwork stalled. No bulldozers came. Locals say the machines wouldn't start. One driver reported hearing a high-frequency tone the moment he tried. Another said he blacked out. The site remains untouched, the soil undisturbed. But the stories persist. No one hears a scream. But they feel it like pressure in the chest, like memory trying to surface, like something beneath the ground pushing upward. Beneath the endless sky of the Texas Panhandle, where the land drops away into striated cliffs of red and ochre, lies Palo Duro Canyon, a scar in the earth, too vast to ignore, too quiet to explain. Tourists come for the beauty. Locals know something else hides there. At night, the silence is heavy, not peaceful, but watchful. Campers whisper of eyes in the dark pairs of them, glowing faintly amber or pale blue, always just beyond the firelight. They don't blink, they don't move, until they're gone. Rangers chalk it up to wildlife. Coyotes, deer. But no animal in Texas stands 6 feet tall and leaves no prints behind, and none follow without making a sound. A hiker in 2009 captured a photograph near Fortress Cliff. It showed a ridge in Twilight Flat, empty. But when zoomed, something stood at the edge. A figure tall and narrow, featureless, with arms too long and no discernible head. The photo spread online briefly before being dismissed as a shadow. He deleted the original, said he didn't want to know what it really was. Native traditions in the region speak of spirit silent ones who live in the wind-shaped rock and only emerge when the land is disturbed. They don't attack, they don't warn, they observe. And once you've been seen, you carry something with you. People who visit the canyon often report strange after effects. Static bursts in audio recordings. Electronics failing without cause. A feeling that someone is behind them, even miles from the rim. One geologist studying erosion patterns camped alone for 3 nights. On the second night, he heard footsteps crunching gravel, slow and steady outside his tent. He called out. No answer. The next morning, he found nothing but a line drawn in the dirt. A perfect circle around his tent. He packed and left before sunset. The oldest stories say the canyon was never meant to be entered, that it was carved not by water, but by something fleeing, something that tore through the land in silence and left the watchers behind. And the watchers don't forget. Even now, some visitors report voiceless murmurs in languages they don't recognize. Others describe time distortion, a short hike taking hours, a missed sunrise, a sudden leap from afternoon to night. In 2021, a film crew attempted a night shoot deep in the canyon. Their audio cut out every time the cameras faced north. They adjusted equipment. It kept happening. One crew member later claimed to have lost an entire hour of footage. It had been recorded then overwritten by static, laced with faint breathing. The footage was destroyed. No copies remain. But one still frame was saved. It showed the canyon at dusk, empty and wide, except in the upper right corner, where a reflection hovered eyes, level with the lens, glowing in a place where no light source existed. Out in the dry folds of Valverde County, where the desert stretches without interruption and the wind has learned to keep secrets, there are shapes in the sand that don't belong to time. They emerge after storms, half revealed in dust and rock, only to vanish again beneath the dunes. Locals call them tombs, though no one has seen what lies inside. Built of fitted stone blocks that don't match any local geology, the structures have no doors, no visible entrances. Some are partially collapsed, others intact, except for erosion and heat. And all of them point west perfectly aligned, as if staring towards something just below the horizon. The first known account comes from a cavalry survey in 1871. A sergeant sketched a rectangular shape rising from the desert floor, its surface smooth as glass, and etched with what he described as foreign marks, neither Spanish nor tribal. The sketch was archived, the location redacted. Decades later, a group of amateur treasure hunters stumbled across what they thought was a bunker. The top had caved in, revealing a dark shaft below. They descended less than 20 feet before retreating. Not because of danger, but because of the sound. A low, constant tone. Not mechanical, not wind, just vibration, like something living far beneath the stone. They reported the site, then left the state. One later claimed he couldn't sleep near anything made of limestone again. The Bureau of Land Management marked the area as protected in the 1980s. No reason given. Since then, the tombs have appeared on no public maps, but satellite images still capture their outlines, rectangular shadows where nothing should stand. In 2006, a geology drone scanning fault lines detected an unusual thermal signature square, uniform, and 40 degrees cooler than the surrounding terrain. The footage was lost during post-processing. The contractor was never named. There are whispered stories from Border Patrol units stationed nearby. They speak of odd lights moving just beneath the sand at night, footprints that begin near the tombs and end after 5 steps. One report describes a patrol truck losing all power when approaching the rear radio silence, headlights dimmed, GPS spinning. They waited 2 hours before the engine restarted on its own. It's not just officials. Migrants crossing the desert have shared stories of figures standing motionless near the tombs. Not statues, not people, just shapes, watching, then gone. A rancher who attempted to excavate one of the tombs found his equipment, failing batteries drained, tools rusted overnight. He left the hole open. When he returned the next morning, it had filled itself. Sand? Maybe. But no wind had blown that night. A geologist who studied the stone samples said they bore trace minerals found only in impact craters. No quarry in Texas matches the composition, which raises the question who built them and why here. If they are tombs, what do they hold? And why do they never fully reveal themselves, as if the land wants them half forgotten? In the marshy lowlands of Brazoria County, where the Gulf air clings to everything and the roads dip just enough to flood, there's a curve along Highway 521 that older locals refuse to drive after dark. There's no sign, no marker, but the trees on the roadside lean back, as if giving space to something that doesn't want to be touched. They call him the Burned Man. Not a ghost, not a legend, but a recurring presence. The earliest mention comes from an 1892 sheriff's log. Figure spotted along roadside. Blackened skin, no clothing, unmoving, vanished before contact. In 1934, a truck driver claimed to have nearly hit a man standing in the middle of the road at 3 a.m. The headlights revealed a figure completely charred, but standing upright. The driver swerved and crashed into a ditch. When help arrived, there was no one else there but the asphalt was warm where the figure had stood. Over the decades, similar sightings surfaced. Always the same location, always the same figure. Burned black, with no eyes visible, no sound, no movement unless watched. In 1978, 2 teenagers reported seeing the burned man near the drainage canal. They approached within 50 feet before one of them began screaming uncontrollably. She was hospitalized and refused to speak of what she saw. The other wrote in a notebook, "He looked at us with no eyes, but I still felt it." That notebook is held in a private collection. Witnesses often describe a smell sulfur and wet ash. Electronic devices fail when close. Car engines stall, lights flicker, and there's a detail many share without prompting. The figure is surrounded by a faint shimmer in the air, like heat rising off pavement, but the temperature drops. One man who tried to film the burned man caught only 5 seconds of footage, a shape standing still, and then the lens fogging over as if submerged. The footage ends with static and the sound of heavy breathing. He sold the camera and left the state. Folklore ties the burned man to a refinery explosion in the early 1900s, though no official record confirms this. Others claim it's a cursed soul, punished for crimes long buried in the swamp. But there's a more unsettling theory whispered in bars and late-night AM radio calls that it isn't a ghost at all, that it's not dead, that it's something else trying to understand us, standing in the same place, decade after decade, learning how we react to fear. And once you've seen him, something follows. People report dreams for weeks, afterward burnt landscapes, static voices, the feeling of skin tightening. One man claimed he began waking up with black soot on his hands. Another moved away, but still finds ash on his windowsill every time it rains. The burned man doesn't chase, doesn't speak, doesn't leave. But once you've looked at him, he knows you, and forgetting becomes impossible. In the limestone bluffs of Crockett County, west of Ozona, There are ridges where even the locals don't climb anymore. The ground is brittle there, broken by erosion and time, and yet, in certain spots, it isn't rock that catches the eye but metal. Smooth, flat, cold to the touch even under the punishing sun. The surfaces appear flush with the earth, almost indistinguishable from the stone around them. But once seen, they can't be unseen. They call them the unearthed doors. No hinges, no seams, no markings, just rectangular outlines in the rock, about the size of a cellar hatch, set perfectly level into the earth. The first known report dates back to 1948, when a surveyor filed an unofficial memo describing an iron plate embedded in the canyon wall, magnetized and unmovable. The location was never followed up. In 1971, a group of geology students on a field exercise encountered a door at the base of a ravine. They tried to chip around it. Their tools snapped. When they returned the next day, the door was gone, buried, covered, or perhaps simply vanished. They found their broken tools placed neatly in a row where it had been. Some call it a prank. Others aren't so sure. One oil prospector, while drilling nearby in the early 90s, recorded a sudden spike in resistance, followed by a low tone that vibrated up through the drill shaft, like metal under stress. He pulled the operation. 2 of his crew quit that same week, citing anxiety episodes and pressure headaches that never resolved. He never drilled near that area again. The doors are never in the same place. They are always in remote terrain, often after floods or rock slides, as if something below is shifting upward, closer to the surface. One hiker stumbled upon one in 2003 and tried to report it to the sheriff. He brought them back. Nothing was there, just a shallow depression in the rock. But his camera still held the image, a matte black rectangle in pale limestone. No shadows, no rust, no reflection. Locals say animals won't go near them. Dogs whimper and dig their heels in. Birds avoid the airspace above. Even insects disappear around the site. Some people claim to hear a faint hum when close a subsonic rhythm, like breath or like waiting. A few have tried to excavate the sites. No one gets far. Machinery fails. Shovels hit invisible resistance. The ground becomes hard like concrete, even when the rest of the area is soft. And then, after a night or two, the door is gone again. It leaves no trace, except in the minds of those who saw it. One man reportedly marked his location with GPS and returned monthly for over a year. On the 12th visit, he vanished. His truck was found at the site, still warm. His footprints led in circles for several meters, then stopped. The dust was undisturbed beyond that. He was never seen again. The door has not reappeared since. In the far eastern edge of Texas, where the pine forests grow too dense for moonlight, and the Sabine River runs slow and dark, there are stories that don't begin with a scream but with silence. In Sabine County, near the border with Louisiana, hunters speak of something that moves through the woods like fog, but heavier. It makes no sound, but the forest still reacts. Birds go quiet. Leaves still. Even the wind seems to hesitate. They call it the shapeless thing. Not a creature, not a ghost. Just a presence that folds itself into the gaps between trees and thought. The earliest known account comes from 1924, found in the journal of a fur trapper who wrote, "Something in the trees tonight. No eyes, no sound. Trees leaning the wrong way." His body was never recovered, but his camp was found abandoned, with food untouched and his rifle snapped in half like it had been folded. In the 1950s, a ham radio operator recorded strange frequency warps coming from the deep woods-long, bending tones layered with static and a pulsing hum. When amplified, the sound seemed to generate a strange pressure in the room, like standing near a jet engine idling just out of sight. The signal repeated for 3 nights, then stopped. It has never returned. In more recent years, hikers have reported losing time near a particular grove south of Hemp Hill. One woman said she walked for 30 minutes, but her phone recorded 4 hours. When she checked her photos, the last dozen were black, completely dark, with no data errors, just nothing. Her shoes were wet when she returned, though the trail was dry. And one photo at the beginning of the series showed what looked like a distortion in the tree line-like heat shimmer, but horizontal and moving. Witnesses described the same sensation: pressure in the chest, disorientation, and the feeling of being watched not by eyes, but by the space itself. Some say the shapeless thing isn't seen but felt, like a void that moves. Others insist it can be glimpsed from the corner of the eye, a slow motion that bends the lines of the forest. No one has ever gotten a clear photo. Animals react violently. Dogs bark without direction. Deer flee before anything appears. And in one case, a rabbit was found dead near the supposed path of the thing, its body crushed, but with no marks of trauma. It was as if weight had been applied from all directions at once. A local teacher disappeared in 2002 during a weekend camping trip. Her last known voicemail simply said, "It's quiet, too quiet." Her tent was found intact, her belongings untouched. Her boots were beside the fire, but the ashes were cold. The ground where she slept was compressed, flattened, as though something large had lain there, something with no shape. Locals mark the area now. They don't camp there anymore. They say when the woods go silent, you don't stop to listen. You leave. Along the narrow stretch of coastal water known as Laguna Madre, between Padre Island and the mainland, where the tide rolls slow and the seagrass shivers under a permanent haze, strange lights have been reported not above, but below. Fishermen call them sleepwalkers, lights that drift beneath the surface, always out of reach, moving too slowly and too smoothly to be natural. They follow no tide, no current. You can't chase them. And if you anchor above one, it stops moving, as if waiting. The first known reference to the phenomenon appears in a Spanish sailor's log from 1743, describing glowings like lanterns below the sea, unmoving but aware. Since then, reports have continued, always under certain conditions: moonless nights, calm water, and absolute silence. Any sound above a whisper, and they vanish. Marine biologists have tried to explain them: bioluminescent algae, shifting sandbanks, electromagnetic reflections. But none of those hold when the lights pulse in patterns, form rings, or align in rows dozens of meters long. In 1997, a research vessel captured sonar anomalies in a section of the bay near Port Isabel. Perfectly parallel ridges on the seafloor, spaced exactly 6 feet apart for nearly a mile. The data was logged. A follow-up expedition was canceled without explanation. The captain resigned that month. He has never spoken publicly. Local fishermen tell stories in low voices of boats that drift too far into the wrong spot and lose all power, of watches that stop, of the low hum that begins in your ears and settles behind your eyes. They say the lights aren't just under the water, they're looking up. In 2013, a drone equipped with infrared picked up 5 glowing shapes moving slowly through a shallow inlet. They didn't show up on standard video. Only heat sensing could see them, and even then, only briefly. When the drone descended for a closer look, its signal cut out entirely. It crashed into the water. The footage was salvaged 6 frames of glowing lines beneath a perfectly still surface. Fishermen avoid those coordinates now. Some call them ley lines beneath the sea. Others believe they're remnants, markers left behind by something not from here or no longer here. There's a story of a diver, a marine biologist from Galveston, who went down to investigate in 2008. His oxygen tank was found on the deck the next morning, fully pressurized. He never returned. His dive computer registered no depth, no time logged, as if he had never entered the water at all. Locals set shrimp traps near the lights and returned to find them empty, never broken, never disturbed, just clean, scrubbed. The lights haven't stopped, They don't fade with the season. If anything, they become more frequent. Satellites sometimes pick them up now brief, faint pulses just beneath the surface, forming grids too perfect for nature, too quiet for technology. And still, no one knows what powers them or why they move when watched, only that they are there, still, waiting. In the vast silence of Big Bend, where the Rio Grande carves deep into shadowed cliffs, and the desert stretches so wide it feels hollow, there is a sound that does not belong. It is not the wind or the cry of birds, nor the shifting stones under boot. It is a bell. Just one. A single metallic tone, as if struck clean and without echo, cutting through the stillness like a blade through fabric. Hikers have reported hearing it for over 100 years. One clear chime, always from ahead, never behind. No matter how far they walk toward it, they never reach its source. The sound comes from nowhere, and it leaves something behind. The first documented case is from a 1912 Ranger logbook. Heard bell at 11:47 p.m. Clear sky. No cattle nearby. Stood still for several minutes. No second chime. Sound felt personal. Since then, the pattern has remained. Never more than one ring. Never predictable. Sometimes in daylight. Sometimes at midnight. Some say it only comes when you're completely alone. One geologist hiking a remote trail reported hearing the bell twice in the same day, once at sunrise, and again just before dusk. He followed the sound. His GPS froze. The terrain seemed to repeat itself, rock formations in the same shape, one after another, though he was walking in a straight line. He returned with cracked boots, bloodied hands, and no memory of how he'd gotten back. His field journal simply said, "It called. I listened. It didn't like that." Some believe it's a remnant of lost mining operations, the echo of a collapsed bell tower, long buried in the stone. But there are no records of such structures in the areas where the bell is heard. Others think it's older, something the land itself remembers, a sound embedded in the bones of the canyons. In 1974, a group of researchers camped deep near the Mariscal mine ruins. Their recordings captured coyotes, wind, and silence. Then, at 2:16 a.m., a bell. Crisp. Loud. No other sounds followed. The next morning, one of their tents was gone. Not collapsed. Gone. Poles, canvas, sleeping bag, even the fire pit beside it, erased. The rock beneath was warm. No footprints remained. The researchers left that day. They never published their findings. In recent years, park rangers have logged dozens of unofficial reports. A lone traveler hears the bell and soon finds themselves off-trail, disoriented, hours lost to terrain that seems unfamiliar. Some believe the sound is directionala, lure, calling people into places that were meant to stay undisturbed. A place that echoes not because it's empty, but because it's listening. One ranger, who spent 30 years in the park, said he only heard the bell once during his final week before retirement. He refused to describe the moment, only said, "It wasn't a warning, it was recognition." No one has ever recorded the bell successfully. Audio devices fail, batteries die, lenses fog over, and yet those who hear it say the sound never leaves them. It's not remembered. It's carried. Somewhere between the dust-covered shelves of forgotten bookstores and the wooden boxes at backwoods estate sales, a map has surfaced again and again. Always hand-drawn, always on aged parchment, always the same ink, same symbols, same strange absence of a signature. No one knows where it came from. No one ever remembers buying it. They simply find it one day folded between pages, tucked into drawers, rolled behind other things, as if it had always been there. Its lines trace across Texas, but not as we know it. No highways, no cities. Instead, it marks ancient trails, shaded areas labeled with cryptic titles like the Sleeping Soil, Ashmouth, And where no sound follows, tiny illustrations flank these places. A broken bell, a hollow tree with no shadow, a ladder disappearing into stone. One section roughly aligned with the hill country features a red ink marking shaped like an eye, beneath which is written, in small script, "This remembers." Cartographers who've studied it say the scale is inconsistent. Rivers bend the wrong way. Elevations don't match topographic records. And yet, when you overlay it against satellite imagery, certain rock formations, dry creek beds, and forest clearings align with eerie precision. In 1985, a historian named Arlen Voss claimed to have followed one of the routes for over 70 miles. He described landmarks that shouldn't exist: a wall of stone, arranged in a spiral, a tree that bled clear sap when cut, and a plateau where no birdsong could be heard, though his recorder picked up a low, droning tone like wind through metal. He vanished a week after announcing he would publish his findings. His apartment was found untouched, his notes gone. Only the map remained folded and left at the doorstep of a friend with no note. In 2007, the map surfaced again, this time in a pawn shop near Tyler. The owner swore it had never been in his inventory. A local student bought it, thinking it was art. Within a month, he was hospitalized with unexplained tremors and visions of moving paths and rivers of stone that go up. He burned the map after discharge. The ashes clung together like cloth. There are theories, of course. Some believe it's a hoax passed between occult circles. Others think it was created by surveyors who lost their minds in the wilderness. But a few, very few, believe it is something older. Not a map of where to go, but where not to. A record of places buried for a reason. One collector noted that the paper fibers contained no cellulose, no plant matter, only trace minerals found in meteorite dust. That test was never repeated. The map disappears often, stolen, lost, destroyed. But somehow, it always comes back, folded, waiting. And each time, a new trail seems to appear, one that wasn't there before, as if the land is still writing itself, or remembering. North of Albany, past the ranch fences where the land begins to flatten and the sky swells with emptiness, there's a field most people won't talk about, not directly. They call it the place where sound goes wrong. But others, braver or less careful, call it the screaming field. It looks like any other pasture in Shackelford County: sun-bleached grasses, scattered mesquite, rusted fencing, curling in upon itself. But something is wrong with the air there. Sound feels too close. Footsteps fall heavy, like walking underwater. And on certain nights, when the humidity clings and the clouds hold low, there comes a scream. Not distant, not faint, but close, deafening, like a siren with lungs. It starts low, like pressure building in the earth, then bursts up through the soil in a long, human-like howl that ends in a choking gasp. No mouth, no throat, just vibration. Residents in nearby houses have reported hearing it since the 1940s. At first, they thought it was animals, then weather, then each other. But over time, the pattern became undeniable. The scream always starts at the exact same time, 2:37 a.m., and never lasts more than 12 seconds. Long enough to freeze you. Not long enough to prove. In 1961, a ranch hand attempted to record it. His tape captured nothing but static. He tried again a week later. Same time, same result. But when the tape was played back in reverse, it produced a low chant. 5 syllables, unintelligible, rhythmic. He burned the recorder that night. No one's heard from him since. His truck was found 5 miles away, headlights pointed at the field. Engine cold, keys in the ignition. The ground beneath the field is solid clay, but survey teams have found anomaly pockets of loose soil, long narrow voids, and a strange iron resonance when struck. Some believe there's something buried beneath, Others say it's not what's beneath, but what's been left behind. That it's not a burial ground, but a boundary. One farmer who tried to fence off the field found his posts twisted overnight. Not cut, twisted. Another reported that after driving a tractor across the center, the engine locked and the metal frame warped inward, as if something had gripped it. Most reports end the same way. They don't go back. Even animals avoid the place. Coyotes won't cross it. Birds won't land. The grass grows thinner every year. One soil scientist took a sample in 2004. When tested, the results came back showing trace elements not common to Texas: manganese, boron, and something unidentified. The lab asked for another sample. He never sent it. Later, he admitted in an email that he'd begun hearing the scream even during the day, even in his dreams. The email ended mid-sentence. His computer was found open, the cursor blinking. The scream, people say, is not a warning. It's a memory being replayed. Not for us, but by something that cannot stop reliving it. And if you hear it once, you'll never forget the sound your bones made trying to escape. In the dry vastness of Pecos County, where dust moves like smoke across forgotten roads and mesquite trees crack in the sun, there are wells that never empty. Dozens of them. Some collapsed, some still open, all older than any official record claims. Locals call them the Whisper Wells, built by ranchers, supposedly, or settlers, or maybe by no one still alive. They are spread out over miles, far from any homestead, surrounded by nothing but cactus, broken stone, and a silence so deep it feels engineered. And yet when you stand at the rim and listen not for water, but for breath, you'll hear them. Not echoes, not wind, but voices, always faint, always below. The first written account dates to 1883, from a traveling preacher who stopped to drink and heard what he described as prayer, not in any tongue known to me, but certain in rhythm and full of sorrow. He poured the water back and kept walking. The well is still there, still full. In the 1930s, a driller attempting to assess one of the sites for possible reclamation lowered a microphone into the shaft. For 17 minutes, there was nothing. Then came a series of clicking sounds, followed by what sounded like a child reciting numbers in reverse. The man went deaf the following week. He said his ears were fine, there was just nothing left to hear. Not silence, absence. A few of the wells have been sealed by concrete, but the voices continue. Ranchers nearby say they hear murmurs at night, drifting over the land like smoke. A sheriff once attempted to record one. When he played back the tape, it wasn't sound he captured, it was pressure. The file read as empty, but playback created vibrations in the room strong enough to crack a window. He never tried again. Geologists insist it's subterranean shifts or air pockets playing tricks. But linguists who've analyzed rare surviving recordings claim the speech carries patterns from multiple dead languages: Sumerian, Etruscan, and in one case, an unclassified dialect thought to originate from northern Africa. How those languages ended up echoing in remote Texan wells remains unanswered. Some say the wells were never meant to give water. They were built as mouths, vents, and something beneath has been talking for far longer than we've been listening. There's a legend that if you drop a question into the dark, wait a full minute, and listen carefully, you'll get an answer. But it won't be the answer you wanted. It'll be the one you needed. Few attempt it twice. One man left his recorder at the edge overnight and returned to find it melted, though the temperature never exceeded 80 degrees. What survived of the casing was covered in tiny scratches, not random, but rhythmic like writing. Others report dreams after visiting the wells, falling, being spoken to in impossible tongues, waking with sand in their mouths and the taste of metal on their tongue. No two voices ever sound alike, but they are always waiting, patient, unchanging, as if rehearsing something long forgotten until someone listens just long enough to bring it back. South of Corsicana, where the land flattens into pastures and the air hums with power lines stretching toward nowhere. There is a rise in the land, a gentle hill just high enough to offer a view of the road below. Locals call it Watcher's Rise. Not because of the view, but because someone is always there. Always. For as long as anyone remembers, travelers passing that stretch have reported seeing a figure standing still at the crest of the hill, never moving, never closer. Some say it wears a broad-brimmed hat. Others describe a woman in a long, faded coat. A few swear it's a child, thin and unmoving, staring without a face, but always in the same place, always at the same angle facing the road. There are no photos. Cameras aimed at the figure produce only blur, as if the lens can't quite catch the focus. Even high-resolution drone footage shows only distortion like heat rising from asphalt. And when anyone climbs the hill to investigate, the figure is gone. Not fled, not hiding, just not there. But the moment they turn their back to leave, they say they feel it behind them again. Watching. One man parked beneath the rise for 6 nights, trying to catch it appear. On the 7th, he was found asleep in the front seat, eyes wide open, heart stopped, no signs of trauma. His dashcam showed static from 11 to 2:13 a.m. Then silence. He was buried with his eyes still open. Stories of the Watcher go back to at least 1,889, when a stagecoach driver recorded a figure of a man atop the ridge, unmoving despite the storm. His passengers saw nothing, but the horses refused to cross the path until sunrise. In 1926, a preacher walking alone to his church claimed the Watcher spoke without words, communicating a message, not in language, but in gravity. He never preached again. His journal ended with the line, "Some things see us more clearly than we see them. The hill has no structures, no graves, nothing beneath the soil but layered clay and ancient stone. Geologically unremarkable. But dogs won't climb it. Birds never rest there. And weather shifts slightly around its peak wind drops. Sound dulls as if the air thickens. Attempts to fence the land have failed. Posts rot within weeks. Metal bends inward. The owner no longer tries. A professor from Dallas once proposed it was a shared hallucination and embedded cultural phantom. But during a controlled test with volunteers, every participant drew the same outline, described the same stillness, and felt the same tightening in the chest when looking up toward the hill. The professor canceled further research. When asked why, she replied only, "It saw me. The Watcher never comes closer. It never speaks. It only waits. And no one has ever seen it leave, because it doesn't need to." Blanco Canyon, tucked into the southern edge of the Llano Estacado, is a place where maps start to feel untrustworthy. The red walls rise steep, wind-carved and ancient, but it's not the stone that unsettles. It's the time. Hikers enter and return changed, not by injury or weather, but by chronology. They speak of watches stopping, of phones rebooting with wrong dates, of sun positions that don't align with the time of day. One couple, avid backpackers from San Angelo, entered the canyon on a Saturday morning and re-emerged late Sunday evening. They thought they'd hiked for 6 hours. Their GPS tracker logged 34. Their families filed missing person reports. But they had no memory of anything beyond a single loop trail. Their shoes were worn as if they'd walked for days. The woman had sunburns in patterns that didn't match the weather reports. And both had a recurring dream afterward, a spiral carved into sand, turning counterclockwise, always deepening. The earliest known report dates back to 1906, when a surveyor named Harlan Ketch documented unsettling variance in shadow length and the audible delay of echo. His instruments recorded temperature drops without weather shifts, and his final field note reads, "The sun stalled today. I waited. It blinked." He died that winter, his journal buried with him at his request. But it was found again in 1952 in a box labeled, "Not Yet." Modern accounts are more bizarre. A drone flight mapped the canyon in 2011, recording HD video and GPS data. On playback, certain frames repeat, not glitching repeating. Two birds fly in a loop, endlessly crossing the same branch. The GPS logs miles never flown. When the drone returned, its internal clock was set to 1971. Engineers called it corrupted metadata. Others weren't so sure. The terrain itself shifts subtly. Trail markers vanish. Rock formations appear, then are gone. Multiple hikers have claimed to find carvings in stone written in English, but etched backward, perfectly mirrored. When photographed, the symbols fail to appear. Some geologists blame magnetic interference from nearby deposits, but compasses don't spin, they freeze. And even more unsettling, not everyone inside the canyon experiences the same thing. Groups split. Watches disagree. Memories conflict. One park ranger tells of a solo camper who radioed for help, claiming it was Tuesday, despite it being Friday. His food supply matched a 5-day stay. He'd been there for 12 hours. The ranger now refuses to patrol that sector alone. There's a ridge deep in the canyon where trees grow in tight spirals. Not bent by wind, but grown that way, as if time itself twisted around them. One botanist, studying the rings, found irregular gaps between years' entire decades missing from the growth. And then there's the echo. Yell in the canyon, and the sound comes back. Wrong. Too fast. Or too slow. Or in a voice not your own. One man said he heard his own scream, reply 10 minutes after he'd made it. Not as an echo, but as a warning. The canyon does not trap people, but it edits them. What it removes is never obvious until it's too late to remember what you were missing. Beneath the heat-stained stones of the Alamo, where schoolchildren walk past plaques and flags, there are whispers of a room that doesn't appear on modern maps. It's not mentioned in tour scripts or official schematics, but older plans, hand-drawn ones, annotated by caretakers and architects, long gone, show a sealed chamber beneath the southern wall. No entrance, no measurements, only a square, and a note written in ink faded to rust. Do not open. Room holds. The idea of hidden passages beneath the Alamo isn't new, but most are chalked up to legends: smuggler tunnels, escape routes, burial vaults. This room is different. It has no narrative, only absence. In 1936, during restoration work for the Texas Centennial, contractors removing old flooring reported a hollow sound near the base of the southern wall. When they drilled, they struck metal, not piping, not stone, something forged, reinforced. The report was filed. The area was resealed. No public explanation was given. In 1979, an archivist discovered correspondence between a Spanish colonial engineer and a priest stationed in San Antonio, dated 1787. The letter describes a chamber to remain closed until the earth forgets the violence buried there. No other context, no attached plans, just a warning. The letter was quietly removed from the archive. Since then, those who've worked the Alamo night shift have told stories. A thud from below, like something shifting its weight. A low groaning heard beneath the floor in the early hours. And once, in 1992, a maintenance worker swore he saw dust rising from the stonas if something had exhaled. Tour guides don't speak of the room, but one, now retired, kept a private journal. In it, he describes an experience during a power outage. While waiting in the silence, he says he felt a vibration, not sound, but something beneath him, pulsing slowly. He stepped away from the southern wall. It stopped. In 2003, ground-penetrating radar was quietly brought in under the guise of foundation inspection. The scans were never published, but a leaked image showed an anomaly, a near-perfect cube, surrounded by denser material, suggesting reinforcement. The team disbanded. The lead technician relocated without notice. The sealed room isn't just forgotten, it seems protected, walled off by time and intention. But there's one final clue. A stone panel inside the Alamo bears a mark, a small triangle, etched so faintly it disappears under direct light. Matching triangles have been found in other Spanish missions across Texas, all near places where history ends abruptly. Some believe the room holds artifacts too dangerous to reveal, items taken during conquest and never meant to resurface. Others think it's not a room at all, but a lock. A place built not to store something, but to keep it from waking. And though officials deny its existence, one quiet fact remains. The southern floor is always just slightly warmer than the rest. As if beneath it, something waits, not forgotten, but contained. West of Alpine, where the land breaks into desert scrub and horizon, lies a stretch of nothing that has made people stare for over a century. The Marfa lights, they call them dancing orbs of red, white, and yellow that appear without warning, hover in the dry air, and vanish just as quickly. Scientists call it refracted light, car headlights, temperature inversions. But those who've truly watched them know these lights move with intention. They don't just float, they follow. They don't just flicker, they pulse in rhythm. And sometimes they multiply. A single orb becomes 2, then 4, then 8th, overing in a line like sentinels. People who try to approach them never get close. The lights drift, reposition, and once, in 1981, were reported to circle a man's truck for over 20 minutes before shooting straight upward and disappearing in silence. His engine wouldn't start until the next morning. The earliest written accounts go back to 1883, when a rancher named Robert Ellison saw a lantern where no one should have been. Thinking it was a lost traveler, he rode out only to find emptiness and silence. He returned the next night. The lights did too. Since then, locals have accepted them as part of the landscape. But others tell stranger stories. A group of geology students in the 1970s set up camp to study the phenomenon. Their equipment picked up no electromagnetic anomalies, no seismic shifts, but each of them later described dreams of glowing tunnels, voices calling their names, and one who claimed he woke up 10 feet from where he'd fallen asleep, with burn marks on his boots. The lights are most often seen near Mitchell Flat. People park along Route 67 and wait. Some nights, nothing appears. Other nights, the show begins within minutes, flashes of light weaving in and out of each other, occasionally forming geometric patterns. One woman captured a perfect equilateral triangle of lights hovering for 11 seconds before it dissolved. She deleted the footage 2 days later, said it didn't feel right to keep it. Skeptics have tried to debunk it all, yet no consistent explanation has ever matched the behavior. The lights don't respond to headlights, don't appear in predictable weather, and don't follow the laws of reflection. One physicist admitted anonymously, whatever it is, it's aware of being watched. Native legends tell of spirit fires that danced above the earth, guardians of sacred ground who revealed themselves only to those with unfinished truths. Some elders believe the Marfa lights are watching over something buried, something not meant to be found. And though thousands have seen them, none can say what they are. Cameras capture them, eyes track them, but no one touches them. No one hears them. Only the land reacts, coyotes falling silent, wind halting mid-breath, and an odd pressure behind the eyes like altitude change. They vanish like a held breath exhaled. But those who see them once often return, because deep down, they know what they saw wasn't a trick of the light. It was something waiting to be seen. Near the skeletal remains of Terlingua, where the Chisos Mountains cast long shadows and the air tastes of rust and sunburn, there's a mine entrance no one talks about. It's not on the town's ghost tour. It's not marked on maps. Locals call it the Rattling Pit. No one remembers the name it had when it was active. Or perhaps they do, and choose not to speak it. The mine collapsed sometime in the early 1900s after a dynamite charge triggered a chain of cave-ins, deeper than any engineer had predicted. 3 men died. Their bodies were never recovered. What's strange is what happened after. For weeks, townspeople reported tremor-small vibrations, always centered near the old shaft. They chalked it up to unstable ground. But the shaking continued for years. No earthquakes, no mining, just intermittent rattling, as if something beneath was shifting in its sleep. Then came the sounds. Not explosions, not gas vents, but voices. Faint, garbled, always just beyond comprehension. Sometimes pleading, sometimes rhythmic, like chanting. The sheriff at the time, a man known for his skepticism, spent the night above the site. He left before sunrise, pale and silent. He quit his post a week later and moved north. Geologists claim the vibrations are the result of thermal pockets under pressure, but seismographs show no activity, no motion, just sound. In 1972, a radio enthusiast from El Paso set up a receiver on the rim of the pit. He captured 12 minutes of static, then 4 words spoken in a language no one could identify. He mailed the tape to a linguist in New Mexico. The package arrived empty. There are stories of animals disappearing near the site, coyotes that approach but never leave, birds that fly overhead and drop from the sky mid-flight. Even insects avoid it. No nests, no webs, just dead silence. A biologist once tried to camp nearby for research. He made it till midnight, then drove out of town without collecting his gear. He later told a reporter that the ground hummed like bone. In 1996, a small group of thrill seekers descended into what remained of the upper shaft. They didn't get far, just 30 feet down, before their ropes began to sway, though there was no wind. One man claimed he saw movement below fingers, reaching out of the stone itself. His footage was never released. What terrifies locals isn't that something went wrong in that mine, it's that something might have come out of it. The land around the pit is barren. Nothing grows. The rocks there are smooth, not eroded, but polished, as if by friction or touch. And every so often, someone walking too close reports a sensation, not pain, but pressure, like being watched by something deep below the ground that doesn't need eyes. The mine is sealed with a crude iron grate, but it rattles. Not in the wind, not from heat. It rattles when nothing else does. When the desert holds its breath and the sun begins to drop, that's when the pit remembers. Southwest of San Antonio, where the roads snake through limestone and mesquite, there's a lake born not of nature but of need. Medina Lake, filled in 1913 by damming the Medina River, swallowed towns, trees, and stories. One of those stories has never stopped echoing. Before the valley was flooded, there stood a mission, outpost small, adobe, forgotten by records, but remembered in fragments. Local families spoke of a bell tower, crooked and half sunk into the hillside. The priests were long gone by the late 1800s, but the bell remained, rusted, heavy, and, according to a rancher's diary from 1902, it rang on its own. No wind, he wrote. No rope. Just a sound like morning. When the valley was cleared for flooding, no official mention of the mission was made, but the bell tower was still standing. A final photograph, blurred and underexposed, shows its outline against a skeletal tree. Then, the water came, and the mission was gone. Today, when drought lowers the lake, stones begin to break the surface. Foundations, steps, and once, in 2011, the very tip of a weathered bell tower. No bell, no cross, just the empty window where sound once lived. Fishermen have long told of strange echoes over the water, not voices, not engines, just a single, low chimimetallic and out of place. It never repeats. It never follows a pattern. But it comes only on nights with no wind, no clouds, and no moon. One diver, who went searching for the structure during a particularly low year, came back shaken. He didn't find the bell, but he claimed the water grew colder near the base of a submerged wall. Not deep. Cold, he said. Wrong. Cold. Like the lake didn't want me there. Some say the bell rings for more than memory, that it tolls in response to presence acknowledging those who watch from the shore, those who know it shouldn't be heard. In 1986, a family camping near the lake heard the bell just before dawn. The next morning, the youngest child was gone. They found him a mile downshore, barefoot, standing ankle-deep in the water, staring west. He wouldn't speak for 2 days. When he did, he only asked, "Why did it call me?" No one has recorded the bell successfully. Microphones pick up ambient noise, waves, insects. But when the bell rings, the devices go blank. Not silent blank. As if something erased that moment from the recording. The church registry of nearby Bandera lists a final note in 1912. Moved what could be moved. Left the rest to the water. May it remain still. But it doesn't. Not always. And when the lake drops low, and the air hangs heavy, and the world seems to hesitate between seconds, that's when the chime comes. Not loud, not near. Just enough to make you stop and wonder if the water beneath you remembers what was buried. And if it does, whether it's trying to come back. Far out in Presidio County, past the Border Patrol checkpoints and stretches of mesquite too stubborn to die, there's a place where the desert doesn't sleep. An old stone well, crumbling and half buried, stands in the middle of nowhere. No signs, no paths, no reason to be there. Locals call it El Pozo Gritante, Screaming Well. It shouldn't make noise. It's dry. The wind doesn't reach it. But some nights, especially in the dead heat before dawn, it cries out. Not wind, not echoes, screams. High, fractured, human-sounding, but wrong. No one knows where the well came from. No ranch records, no travel routes. Some say it predates the Mexican-American War. Others claim it's older than the Spanish missions, but no one claims it. In 1934, a drifter passing through stopped to rest near the well. He wasn't seen again for 3 days. When he emerged in the town of Redford, his clothes were torn, his skin burned despite overcast skies, and his voice permanently hoarse. He never spoke of what happened. He died 6 months later, throat cancer. He was 31. Later, in the 1960s, a geologist named Roy Peterson mapped anomalies in the area. He spent one night near the well. His journal, found in the glove box of an abandoned truck, read, "It doesn't echo. Sound falls in and doesn't come back. But something else does. Those who've stood near the well report strange sensations pressure in the ears, vertigo, sudden nausea. Animals refuse to approach, coyotes avoid it, snakes flee it. Even insects seem to vanish near its edge." A photographer once tried to take long exposure shots of the well at night. Every photo came back overexposed, as if the well itself glowed, but the light source couldn't be traced. The ground around it remained cool. The sky stayed dark. There's one more story. In 2002, a group of paranormal researchers visited the site. They lowered a microphone into the shaft, over 60 feet of rope. The playback revealed static, then a whisper, multiple voices speaking at once, layered, urgent. One of the researchers fainted. Another quit the field entirely. The audio was lost in a fire 2 weeks later. Some think it's a gateway. Others say it's a gravone that doesn't want to be quiet. And then there's the theory that the well is a scar, a wound in the desert where something was torn out or something fell in. Whatever the truth, one thing remains consistent. The well should be silent, but it isn't. And those who hear it never quite forget the sound. It calls. Not every night, not to everyone, but sometimes. Palo Duro Canyon is wide enough to swallow sound, deep enough to steal light, and long enough that not even locals agree where it truly ends. It's called the Grand Canyon of Texas, a painted corridor of stone and wind, but beneath its layered cliffs and quiet trails lies a story the brochures leave out. A pattern. Since the early 1900s, hikers have disappeared in Palo Duro. Not one or two, dozens, always in small groups, always near the canyon floor. Some vanish without a trace. Others leave behind scenes that feel more like questions than answers. In 1933, a group of 3 surveyors failed to check in after a mapping trip. Their camp was found 5 days later. The tent was upright, their tools undisturbed. The fire was cold, but the coffee pot still hung over the coals. Footprints led in every direction, none led out. In 1961, a school teacher and his 2 sons hiked into the canyon for a weekend. Their car remained in the lot. Rangers found their trail to a riverside clearing, where their gear was neatly placed beside a circle of stones. No signs of struggle, no sign of life. The ranger who filed the report never returned to Palo Duro. He moved to Montana and refused to speak of Texas again. Then came 1999. A family of 4 disappeared over spring break. Their campsite, located via helicopter, looked untouched, food unpacked, sleeping bags rolled out. A journal entry from the mother ended mid-sentence. Last night the wind sounded like no bodies, no signs, no noise. Just that same silence Palo Duro wears like armor. Geologists blame the canyon's acoustics, its strange ability to bounce and bend sound. Others suggest disorientation, sudden storms, or mountain lions, but the patterns don't match. Storms leave debris. Predators leave remains. Palo Duro leaves nothing. The Comanche once called the canyon the place where spirits walk. Some oral histories suggest forbidden zones, places where one should not sleep, even with fire. One tribal elder, when shown photos of the modern trail system, pointed to a bend in the path and said, "Here, this is where the ground forgets you." Stranger still, a park volunteer in 2015 claimed to see campers vanish with his own eyes. 2 figures walking into a low fog bank. They didn't come out. When he checked, the fog was gone, and so were they. Over time, rumors have grown. Of echoing footsteps that don't match your own. Of stone pillars rearranged overnight. Of voices calling out names no one told them. There's a rock formation near the center of the canyon known as the Devil's Post. Hikers say it's always just out of reach, visible, but somehow never accessible. Some believe the disappearances begin there. Whatever the source, the warnings are the same. Don't camp near the canyon floor. Don't follow unfamiliar paths. And if the wind ever calls your name, don't answer. Because in Palo Duro, the ground doesn't just take people, it remembers how to keep them. Texas is a land of vast skies and wide roads, but beneath its surface lies something older, something that resists explanation. A map etched not in highways, but in whispers. From the sealed rooms below the Alamo to the lights that drift silently over Marfa, from goat-eyed shadows on bridges to the unspoken hunger beneath abandoned mines, these stories are not scattered. They connect. They form a pattern too fragmented to name, but too consistent to ignore. A language written in stone, in silence, in things that vanish without sound. These are not just legends, they're pressure points. Places where the world grows thin. You've now traveled through the forgotten, the hidden, and the sealed. Through dust-choked ruins and canyons that don't echo back. You've heard the bells that shouldn't ring, the screams with no throat to form them, the well that watches. And maybe, just maybe, you've started to see how all of this might not be separate. History doesn't always bury what it cannot explain. Sometimes, it just leaves it out. So the next time you drive through Texas and feel the urge to stop, to look down a dry path that wasn't on your map, ask yourself why. Ask who else might have walked it before you. Ask if they ever came back. And if you like this journey, if the strange, the buried, and the nearly forgotten speak to you, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Sleep History Mystery for more explorations into what the maps forgot to warn us about. Because the world isn't flat and history isn't finished. It just waits.